All right, so some of you might be wondering what has changed in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and there's quite a bit. So let's go over some of the highlights here really quickly. Number one, the art is gorgeous. I know they laid off a bunch of their art staff and are leaning into like AI as a baseline kind of thing, but whatever they're doing is working really well. The style's great. Pretty much all of the pics look great. The wizard is perfect. So that's definitely a highlight here. They added back the bloodied condition, which kind of made an appearance in 4E, and that is flagged whenever a creature is below half health. So I'm guessing we're going to see additional um, abilities and things that play off of that condition as this keeps ramping forward. There are now magic actions like casting a spell. So things specifically resisted by advantage versus magic or suppressed by an anti-magic field. That's going to be a lot more clear. Like a dragon's breath weapon is not magic necessarily. Lots of other actions are identified, like influence for social roles to change NPC attitudes. That's now a codified thing instead of just having to be DM fiat. And I think you're going to find that that's a theme through most of this book is that they're trying to remove that DM ruling component so that the DM is really just an arbiter of the rules as opposed to having to make them up on the fly. I have mixed feelings about that. Maybe there's another video for like a broccoli or something we'll do later. Forced movement is now called transport. You can always choose to fail a save. That's now codified instead of just a house rule. Inspiration is now called heroic inspiration, which is still a stupid name and easy to confuse with bardic inspiration. But also you can use it on any die roll now, not just a d20, and also after rolling. Perception and investigation are more clearly delineated. Search, like looking for stuff, and study, examining and thinking about stuff, along with a lot of other examples out there. Hiding now requires a DC 15 stealth check while heavily obscured or behind 3/4 or total cover. The system's still a little janky. Enemy passive perception doesn't even factor in at all in theory. It's kind of weird. I don't love it. We'll see how it plays out. The invisible condition should have been renamed to unseen based on how they're using it now. Like when you hide, you gain the invisible condition, even though we all have a very specific understanding of what the word invisible means. So I think that's going to cause some confusion. Surprise rounds are no longer a thing. You just have disadvantage on initiative. I think that's streamlined and easy. Opportunity attacks now happen on creatures, not hostile creatures. So there's this fun little loophole now with the Warcaster feat, where if an ally moves past you, you can use your reaction to cast a buff on them because they're just a creature moving through your threatened space. Like, really? Did no one theory craft this at all before it was printed? I don't know. 10 hit points now last until a long rest regardless of the source, which is awesomely abusable with like Armor of Agathis, and then cast Polymorph on them, which gives massive temp HP now instead of like changing your health pool. Combos with the Abjurer Wizard's special ward, all kinds of different stuff, so that's going to be fun. Grapple and shove are now resisted with a strength or dexterity save instead of athletics. Grappled also gives creatures disadvantage to attack anyone besides the grappler, which is new. You can pick locks with sleight of hand now, rules as written. So training in thieves' tools is literally never needed, which I think is pretty clearly a misprint, but still, way to pay attention to details. Let's see. Some class things. Paladin and Ranger levels now round up for spell slot calculation, not down. So that's a little buff. Character creation is basically unchanged. There's no more trait, ideal, bond, flaw. And I think it feels really weird to select your class before your species and background, just out of order with like how a life would progress. I don't know why they did it that way. Probably because class is the most core identity decision that you make, but still. Level 19 no longer specifically gives an ability score increase. It gives an epic boon, which is a new category of feats. Let's see. The number of spells you can prepare is now fixed by class level, not level plus ability score. Wizards only get 3 more spells prepared than everyone else, which further erodes their unique niche for sorcerers. Poor design direction, in my opinion, but whatever. I'm not going to go through every individual class. There's way too much to review, and we already know from the preview videos that they're, on the whole, significantly more powerful than 2014 versions. But a few key things to note, at least about the base classes, if not the subclasses. Bards. Inspiration lasts 1 hour and can be used when a check is failed, which sounds nice, but creates a second pause point during play that'll delay adjudication. I think that's, I don't know, mixed. I think from a play experience, it might be a little bit of a detriment. Magical Expertise also allows spell choices to be from any spell list, which is insanely good. Like, not just the spells you get from that, but all of your spells from leveling up going forward. Wild. Clerics. All domains can pick an armor and weapon proficiency or cantrip, getting plus wisdom damage, so there's a little more flexibility on builds there. Divine Intervention was replaced with essentially an extra 5th level spell slot, which is a hollow and unfortunate change to that, but again, getting rid of DM fiat decisions, whatever. Druids. No metal armor restriction mentioned anymore. That was never a formal rule, at least in 5e, but it was always like just flavor. That's not mentioned at all. Wild Shape was overhauled. It's a bonus action for everyone now, and everybody gets more uses as you level. Circle of the Moon got some buffs, and it's much more survivable. I think that's going to be a much more viable subclass in general. Fighters, lots of new stuff. Probably most notable, Action Surge prohibits any magic actions, so no more spell casting with Action Surge to get like 3 spells off in a turn. Monks, again, lots of new stuff. Jury's still out on whether it was enough to make it feel on par with other classes. We'll see. Paladin, Smites now max out at 1 per turn, and you can't do it on attacks of opportunity, so it kind of limits their Nova potential, which is really what they were famous for in 5e. Rangers, another one with lots of new stuff. General consensus in the online community, at least, is that the class still feels kind of underwhelming. We'll see how that plays as more people get experience with it. Rogue, nothing crazy really changed. They have effect riders you can replace some or all of your sneak attack dice with, like tripping and other things like that. Also, Assassin's opening attack is more broadly useful now instead of the really niche application that it had previously. Sorcerers, they get to prepare more spells. Scales up to 22 prepared spells now instead of 15, like in 5e. They get a bonus action offensive spell buff that lasts for a full minute. And Wild Magic is now completely in the player's control, no longer DM dependent on whether or not you get to roll in the table. Warlocks, Pact Boons are now invocations, so Blade, Tome, Chain, and Talisman. Those are all an invocation that you can select. So you can't have multiples, or you can just omit them entirely if none of them are to your taste. You also get up to 10 invocations now instead of 8 to make up for that, since they expect you're going to be taking 1 or 2 pacts. And they can the invocations that allow you to cast a spell once a day are generally gone, which is probably good because most of them were terrible value, so not a huge loss there. Wizards, no major changes to the core class. Most notable, I think, is that illusionists lost malleable illusions. Sorry, Richard. Good thing you got use of it while you could. Backgrounds. These now give ability score increases instead of the species. So now instead of races being... I'm going to keep calling them races because that's just the terminology I use, and I don't think it's that problematic in a D&D setting. So now instead of races being locked to classes with their stat preferences, it's going to be backgrounds being locked to classes, especially since there's no official customize your origin thing for 2024 backgrounds. You can't just be a sailor that has +2 int kind of thing. All backgrounds now give an origin feat, which are kind of less powerful versions than general feats. Like I said, they can't be customized, but if you use a legacy background from 5e, they can, for some reason. I guess to update it and make sure that it matches with the 2024 stuff. And really being able to customize that and select your origin feat makes most 5e backgrounds better than 2024 backgrounds as a general rule. Species. Dark Vision is now essentially 120 feet across the board, which effectively means you don't have to think about its range in combat or most other situations because nothing really happens outside of 120 feet. So it's either on or off. I still think too many races have Dark Vision at baseline. Force, Necrotic, Psychic, and Radiant damage. These seem to be keyed to overcome physical damage resistances now. They're making a change here a little bit. Likely means that monsters will not be widely resistant to these types. Most 5e monsters aren't already, so that's not a huge change. Monsters that previously had magical weapons are now generally dealing these damage types instead, or as like an added rider or something, which notably are not blocked by Barbarian Rage, which is still just physical damage. So that kind of reduces rage effectiveness in tier 3 to 4 play. Feats, tons of changes, way too many to go into. A couple of the big ones. Lucky, you now get a number of uses equal to your proficiency bonus, but it's now disadvantage or advantage on a roll for somebody you can see, not just a reroll. All general feats give +1 ability score, and fighting styles are now considered feats. It's like a subcategory of feats, like origin feats, general feats, epic boons, but you have to have the fighting style class feature to select those. Equipment, heavy weapons now have a strength requirement. They're not limited to size, so you can now have a great sword-wielding halfling. Healing potions is officially a bonus action to drink and an action to apply. Pretty much everybody played it that way already. Weapon masteries got added. Each weapon has a special little extra ability, like the Great Axe and the Halberd have Cleave, meaning you get a free additional attack against an enemy adjacent to the one you're attacking once a turn. So you have to have the Weapon Mastery class feature to utilize that. In general, these are pretty cool, fun little add-ons. I think probably Nick and Vex are going to be great for rogues, which give you a bonus action attack as part of your action, like for 2-weapon fighting, or Vex gives you advantage on your next attack. But there are definitely some oversights in how they design these. Like, you can benefit from both dueling, which gives you the dueling fighting style, which gives you bonus damage on when you're wielding a single weapon, and the 2-weapon fighting damage bonuses simultaneously while also holding a shield, which makes absolutely no sense. Really, that can just be like fixed by the DM saying knock that shit off, but it shouldn't have to be that way. Toolkits now have some very specific things they allow you to do, like detecting poison in drinks or identifying a type of alcohol with brewer's supplies. Scrolls now have official scribing costs for all levels, which is helpful because that was super nebulous before. Spells, again, like everything changed, but we'll focus on a couple of the major things. Specifically, the 1 spell with a spell slot per turn clause. That means no more using counterspell or silvery barbs on your turn to protect your casting. So if you cast something and an enemy counterspells it, you cannot cast counterspell again to counter their counterspell. You'd have to have an ally do that with their reaction, because that would be 2 leveled spells on your turn. Now, curiously, this also means that if you don't use a spell slot, like if you were to cast a spell via a scroll or a staff or something that doesn't use a spell slot to cast, you could potentially cast 2 leveled spells on a turn. Not sure if that's intentional. Again, seems like kind of a major oversight. We'll see if there's a sage advice on that or something. Let's see. Most of the spells, like the language of the spells that changed, was really just wording and clarification stuff. But a few things did have some pretty significant changes, like Armor of Agathis is now a bonus action to cast, and that effect lasts as long as you have temp hit points from any source, which I mentioned previously. Probably the biggest problem in spells in general is Conjure Minor Elementals. It's busted as fuck. You can combo it with Scorching Ray, Eldritch Blast, or an extra attack where you replace a cantrip, like an Eldritch Knight or a Blade Singer or something, and it is absolutely bonkers damage output, like 2 to 7 times higher than it should be on like a Warlock with Agonizing Blast and their Eldritch Blast, which is generally like the bar for what is good damage on a round. This spell absolutely should not be allowed as is. Or they should make the damage scale every other level instead of every level. It's nuts. There are videos about it. If you're interested, go look it up. Counterspell. This now forces a Constitution save. Also, if it successfully counters something, the countered spell slot isn't lost, which I think is kind of dumb. They're doing it so that players don't feel bad for getting their spells countered or whatever, which I guess makes it more of a tool that DMs don't feel bad about using. I don't know. Maybe just stop feeling bad about it. But that might just be me. Force Cage got some desperately needed nerfs, since that spell was pretty wild. It now requires concentration, and it also consumes the 1500 gold material component, which is brutal. We'll see if that actually fixes it. I think people are still going to take it, and we'll just reserve it for the big fights where it's really valuable. Still a problematic spell either way. Goodberry no longer combos with Life Cleric. Sorry, Robert. Because Life Cleric now requires you to heal hit points on a spell you cast, not an effect that happens after you cast said spell. Haste, when it ends, it's now even worse, so don't take that spell. Polymorph gives you a huge temp HP pool, but also temp HP just at baseline don't go away when the spell ends. They last until a long rest. So you can cast Polymorph on yourself and get like 120 temp HP and then dismiss it and do something else, and you've got 120 temp HP for the rest of the day. I'm not sure what inspired them to do that. All the creature stat blocks that are needed for druids, polymorph, etc., that are common are in the back of the book now as an easy reference, so that this is literally the only book that a player needs. There's also a new rules glossary with definitions of pretty much everything at the back, and that's about it. 3.5 pages of highlight notes. Enjoy.